The group can take out any combination of machine guns and AT weapons, with the platoon commanders being able to customize the layout to their liking.
Alright y'all, welcome back to Come to Arms channel. Okay, so today we're checking out a very highly requested video, and that is one from Battle Order. So Battle Order does some really cool stuff, mainly pertaining to like military unit organization. Now today we're checking out the Swedish Armed Forces. Now we've seen a lot of videos about the Swedish Armed Forces. We have a good idea of what units are in it, but not exactly how they're formed or why they're formed or what their real purpose is exactly. So this is about 18.5 minutes long. I think it's going to be long enough to give us a good idea of what all these units are used for. And at the same time, it is Battle Order, so they do some really cool stuff. So I'm excited. I know you guys are excited since you guys recommended this video a lot. So let's get right into it. Oh yeah, the Navy stuff is going to be pretty cool to get some exposure to.
For Sweden, the return of war to Eastern Europe and Russia's annexation of Crimea shifted the calculus with regards to its armed forces. The end of the Cold War was supposed to be the end of history, the beginning of a new era of peace following the triumph of liberalism. In its aftermath, the Swedish army was rapidly reduced in scope through the 1990s and early 2000s, but at the same time, they also received a new round of modernization, with the introduction of top-of-the-line platforms like the CV-90 infantry fighting vehicle and the Leopard 2 main battle tank.
Yeah, so the Leopard is a beast and the CV-90 is a beast as well. So yeah, it is a weird balance for sure, especially if you're, I know Sweden generally doesn't try and get involved in like international conflicts and whatnot, but it is a fine balance where you're trying to, you know, decrease the size of your military while also staying modern in case you do need to use it. But I think they made the right move with switching out all of their outdated equipment. So now they have this new equipment, so if they need to use it, they have stuff that's more modern, stuff that can actually stand a chance against some of the other modern stuff that's out there. And at the same time, while they have this modern equipment, they might not have too much, but since they have it, they can actually train on it and develop SOPs based off of the stuff that they have already. Because obviously, you're going to need to change the tactics up slightly because the equipment is going to be different. It's going to have different capabilities.
Now, with NATO and Russia staring each other down in the Baltics, the Swedish Armed Forces is putting forth plans to expand its rapid reaction capabilities, increase readiness, and bring back the division. In this video, we're taking you through Sweden's rapid reaction brigades, with a more in-depth look at their tank and armored infantry unit organization, equipment, and doctrine. I'm your host, Brendan.
I'm excited. This is going to be good. Footage looks sick already.
First, I'd like to thank our Patreon supporters who allow us to cover more interesting but less popular topics.
I'll do the same. I appreciate all of y'all.
Grow and get a big at hand. When the Swedish Army implemented its Rapid Reaction Organization Plan for 2014, its professional forces were reorganized into 8 maneuver battalions and a number of independent units. They constitute Sweden's High Readiness Combat Force, which is complemented by numerous support battalions, reserve battalions, and Home Guard Territorial Defense battalions that bring its total force structure closer to 70 battalions.
Okay, 70 battalions. Dang, that's a lot. So talking about the actual, they're saying the professional forces was 8 battalions, but having 70 battalions in the reserve compared to that, that's kind of a lot. But these weapons sort of caught my eye. This is pretty freaking sweet. This reminds me of the old M16 with like the jungle handguard that looks very similar to this. I'll post a picture because that's one that I used for a little bit and it was pretty freaking sweet. And then they have an Accuracy International rifle here. Very cool.
That bring its total force structure closer to 70 battalions. The focus of this video is Sweden's mechanized battalions, which consist of a combination of main battle tanks and infantry fighting vehicles carrying armored infantry.
Yeah, they're legit.
Sweden's full-sized mechanized battalions include the 41st and 42nd Battalions under the Boyrie Regiment, the 191st and 192nd Battalions under the North Regiment, and the 72nd Battalion under the South Scania Regiment. Additionally, just in January 2020, part of the 18th Battle Group stationed in Gotland was reflagged as the 181st Mechanized Battalion. Although this battalion is about half the size of the other mechanized battalions.
Yeah, weird location.
During peacetime, mechanized battalions are grouped into regiments and trained at their home garrisons. But when activated for war, they reorganize and deploy into the 2nd and 3rd Brigades.
Okay. Yeah, so I would imagine the mechanized infantry isn't going to be totally like amphibious. Obviously, it's kind of hard to transport like mechanized vehicles like that. Now, of course, Sweden and all the surrounding countries have like a bunch of like little islands and what have you. But I'd imagine they're not going to want to push many mechanized vehicles onto those small islands. It probably just won't be very advantageous. But we've seen a lot of other amphibious units from like all these, Nordic countries. But of course, we've seen other like amphibious elements in the Swedish Armed Forces that can do stuff, obviously not on like a mechanized infantry level, but they can definitely cause some havoc if they need to.
Happens, each brigade receives a headquarters and separate recon company from the regiments. These staff are each supported by a brigade command company detailed from the command regiment. As its maneuver elements, each brigade then gets an infantry battalion from the Skaraborg, South Scania, and Norrbotten regiments. Okay. 2nd Brigade ends up with 2 mechanized and 1 light mechanized battalion, while the 3rd Brigade gets 3 mechanized battalions. Each brigade is then supported by an artillery battalion, an air defense battalion, an engineer battalion, and a logistics battalion attached from their respective regiments.
Pretty similar.
However, this won't last forever. With the threat of getting caught in the middle of a conflict between NATO and Russia growing, the Swedish Armed Forces plan to expand their forces with a refocus on larger scale operations. As indicated by their most recent budget requests, 2nd Brigade would be reorganized into the 4th Mechanized Brigade in Skövde, while 3rd Brigade would become the 19th Norrland Mechanized Brigade in Boden.
Okay, so I'm not exactly sure what the stipulations of those would actually entail, but I said mechanized and then it also said light mechanized, so is mechanized just normal like battle tanks where light mechanized is sort of like a fighting vehicle? Because I've never really been mechanized infantry myself, so I'm not sure that if that's like an easy sort of separation between the two. But okay, it makes a lot of sense. If they're focusing on more large scale warfare, I imagine they're going to want to add a lot more logistics / maintenance, kind of like more support elements. So for us, you will have the brigades. Underneath them will be the infantry battalions. And then you also have a field artillery battalion. You have the sort of engineer battalion, the support battalion. So it makes a lot of sense. It's very similar to what we see. You need that maintenance and logistics or else things are going to fall apart pretty quickly. The only real obvious difference I saw there was that they had a command element from some other sort of unit. It seemed like it would make a little bit more sense to make them like integrated more, but I'm not sure how that works, to be honest.
The Mechanized Brigade, probably based on the South Scania Regiment, would be formed in Revingehed, while the motorized 1st Infantry Brigade would be formed in Maladalen. The Gotland Battle Group will also be strengthened.
Okay.
These brigades may be integrated into a new division if mobilized, Sweden's 1st Division since it dissolved its last one in 2004. But back to the present. The real punching power of Sweden's rapid reaction forces comes from its mechanized battalions.
Yeah, no kidding.
Very similar to an old American combined arms battalion, each Swedish battalion is equipped with an equal mix of main battle tanks and infantry fighting vehicles with organic fire support, recon, logistics, and pioneers. They consist of 1 battalion headquarters, 1 staff and support company, 2 tank companies, 2 armored infantry companies, and 1 logistics company. Starting from the top, the battalion HQ includes 29 personnel, with a battalion commander, their deputy, a sergeant major, and several staff officers and supporting personnel.
Makes sense.
Staff and support company, meanwhile, includes the command platoon, which supports battalion staff officers, mans command posts, and provides signal support to the HQ. The staff and trains platoon, which provides logistical support to the company. A reconnaissance platoon with 4 CV-90 IFVs split into a platoon HQ in 4 sections. 2 mortar platoons, each with 4 Mjolnir 120mm self-propelled mortars based on the CV-90. And an anti-aircraft platoon with 4 40mm self-propelled anti-aircraft guns, also based on the CV-90 chassis.
Yeah, so this is definitely a little bit more beefed up. So their staff and support company would be like our HHC, our headquarters company. So you would have the command platoon, so that'll be like the headquarters, so like the company leadership and what have you. And then you have the staff and logistics. Yeah, we do have like the XO would probably be in charge of that sort of stuff in the HHC, in charge of, arranging land and ammo if you're doing any training or anything like that. But as far as an entire platoon, yeah, we have like a training room, which is really only like a handful of people, and they will do most of the admin sort of stuff. You do have the recon platoon underneath the HAC, and then you will also have the mortars. But an anti-aircraft platoon is definitely different. So it's pretty similar to what we have. It's just a little bit more beefed up, and obviously it's more mechanized too, so it's even more beefed up.
The CV90 chassis. Next up, the logistics company provides sustainment and mobility support to the battalion. It includes a company HQ and trains, a fuel and ammunition supply platoon, a repair platoon with 1 repair team per maneuver company, among other elements, a medical platoon with 4 teams manning ambulance variants of the BV410 tracked APC, and lastly, a pioneer platoon, which provides mobility and demolition support to the battalion. Among other things, it includes 3 CV9.
So that sounds like an engineer sort of unit, because that's what we use the engineers for, is mainly like paving a way to, for the rest of the infantry guys. But we don't really have engineers that are integrated into an actual battalion, so that's definitely different.
90 is carrying 3 pioneer sections, as well as an armored bridge layer based on the Leopard 2. And now on to what everyone's been waiting for, the maneuver.
Hell
First,
yeah.
the primary offensive capability of the mechanized battalion are its tank companies. The main feature of these companies is Sweden's main battle tank, the Stridsvagn 122, a variant of Germany's improved Leopard 2A5. It's equipped with a 120mm smoothbore tank gun as its main armament and crewed by 4 soldiers. Each tank company consists of a staff and logistics platoon, commanding and supporting 3 tank platoons. The former includes 2 tanks, one for the company commander and one for their deputy. The rest of the platoon comes under
kind of
the
funny to think
separate
about.
Administrative control of a platoon commander and deputy commander who ride in a forward command variant of the CV90. They're in charge of service and support elements in the company. Each company is supported by forward observers with
Okay, so not gonna lie, the entire time he was saying CV90, I was thinking CB90, like the Stridsbot 90 or whatever it was. I was like, why is an anti-aircraft platoon gonna be on like this amphibious sort of craft? So makes a lot more sense now.
Their own CV90. They're equipped with sensors and laser rangefinders to aid in calling in fire missions in support of the company. Integrating fires is key to combined arms doctrine, as indirect fires create situations where friendly forces can maneuver and limits the enemy's ability to employ countermeasures. Previously, the dedicated forward command and forward observation variants of the CV90 were only armed with a machine gun. However, we've been told that now, regardless of specialty function, most CV90s will be equipped with a 40mm Bofors autocannon in the future.
Nice.
In terms of logistical support, the Swedes are unique. Each company, depending on the parent unit, weather conditions, and terrain, can be supported by 2 BV410 armored carriers with a flatbed rear module rather than the standard cargo trucks. Similarly, the Swedes use a 3rd BV410 ambulance for all-terrain medical evacuation.
That's sick.
Only the cargo variant, the ambulance variant seems to be more universal amongst the companies. I
gotta say, that looks a lot better and probably smoother than the FLAs that we had, which is basically just like a Humvee with like a larger back end. And I gotta say, you could probably fit maybe like 1 or 2 casualties in those comfortably, because there's not really a whole lot of room in the back. Those look a lot more comfortable, probably a lot easier to sort of do whatever you're trying to do. And again, a smoother ride definitely helps when you're talking about medical stuff.
Regulated APCs have all-terrain capabilities. This means that each company has a limited logistics and medevac capability that is amphibious, can deal with harsher terrain and snow better than regular trucks, and are protected against rifle fire, mines, and shrapnel.
That's sick.
And lastly, maintenance support for the company is provided by the maintenance variant of the CV90, the STRF 9040 DSG, short for the Driftstotsgruppe, or the Operations Support Group. This vehicle carries the company's chief technician as well as a number of mechanics. The company also has a variant of the German Panzer III Buffo to allow for recovery of immobilized tanks and armored vehicles under fire. All of this supports the company's close combat elements. Each platoon consists of 3 tanks, crewed by a tank commander, gunner, loader, and driver, with the platoon leader acting as the commander of the first tank and the deputy platoon leader commanding the 3rd tank. This gives each Swedish tank company 11 MBTs in total, or 22 for the entire mechanized battalion.
Damn. Again, so for my background, we don't really associate tanks with infantry because it's a completely different thing and they'll be in their own sorts of like units. But it's pretty cool to hear about. I understand that they're going to want to really beef up their echelons because they're not going to have as many units as you would see in like the US military, which obviously makes sense just based off of population and whatnot and probably budget. But it makes sense for them to want to beef everything up because it's a lot easier for them to support everything. And you have a lot more firepower, especially when it's all like mechanized stuff like this.
And now on to the armored infantry companies, which support the tank's mission with infantry fighting vehicles and dismounted infantry. The companies are organized very similarly, consisting of a staff and logistics platoon and 3 armored infantry platoons. The staff and logistics platoon's structure is almost identical with some minor differences. First, the company commander and their deputy are transported in STRF 9040s rather than tanks. Second, rather than a tank-based armored recovery vehicle, the armored infantry company is equipped with one based on the CV-90. At the platoon level,
that's
like
a versatile platform.
The armored infantry also have 3 vehicles. The platoon further breaks down into a platoon headquarters and 3 infantry groups, each with their own IFV lettered E, F, and G. The platoon commander, their deputy platoon commander, and a vehicle commander command the vehicles for F, G, and E respectively. In some units, the platoon leader gets a spare vehicle commander that can take over the vehicle if they dismount. However, perhaps more interesting is a spare NCO called a Navstridsledare. Translated literally as close combat leader, this NCO is a dedicated dismounted commander who, on the orders of the platoon leader, takes command of the dismounted element.
That's what I want to do.
This allows the platoon leader to stay mounted and maintain a closer control over the vehicles while the groups are dismounted.
Let that dude do the dirty work.
The dismounted commander could also be one of the squad leaders given the extra duty. As for those infantry groups, each one of them is split into a mounted and dismounted element. The mounted element includes a driver and gunner who functionally are controlled by their respective vehicle commanders. The dismounted element, meanwhile, consists of 6 soldiers. The group leader typically ranks Führer or Oberführer, being intermediate NCOs with some time and grade. They're typically armed with an AK-5C rifle, a derivative of the FN-FNC.
Freaking sweet, man. Okay, so now we're talking about light infantry stuff, which I'm all about. That's a lot of people, though. In one vehicle, they have all those guys. That's pretty intense. Okay, so we have, dang, what is that, like 10 people in one thing? I don't know how spacious it is on the inside, but it doesn't look very spacious. I gotta say, I'd like to see the inside of that, actually. But okay, so let's see. Nice. Is that what is that, a D-ball? Yeah, a D-ball. Nice, okay. AK-5C, I gotta say, is pretty freaking sweet. Looks like they have just just a normal M203 on there? Looks kind of different in the back, but all right. This is what I'm talking about.
Rifle, a derivative of the FN-FNC with an M203 grenade launcher. They're assisted by a deputy group leader who typically ranks corporal, the first rank attained after completing squad leader training. Then there's also an anti-tank gunner, anti-tank loader, machine gunner, and a rifleman, doubling as a combat lifesaver. The Swedish run a weapons locker concept, where multiple weapon systems of differing capabilities may be employed depending on the situation. The group can take out any combination of machine guns and AT weapons, with the platoon commanders being able to customize the layout to their liking.
Yeah, no, that's good. It looks like they have everything they would need in the event of just normal like ground combat, and you don't have too many different variations. All the weapons are you have the FN-5C, you have a Carl Gustav, and then you have the Mini-Me. So you're not really getting a whole lot of variation, which is going to be nice for logistics. Because if you have a whole bunch of like different weird sorts of weapon systems, then it might get a little bit harder to maintain, the resupply and whatnot.
Anti-tank options. The AT gunner and loader may man a Carl Gustav or coilless rifle. Alternatively, they could leave the Carl G behind and act as riflemen if the group needs to be more mobile or it's unnecessary. In this case, they may or may not be armed with AT-4 disposable anti-tank weapons, which are essentially one-shot versions of the Carl G munition. Other personnel in the squad, like riflemen or leadership, can also carry AT-4s. Additionally, NLAW's short-range fire-and-forget anti-tank guided missiles are available to substitute the AT-4s, held in the battalion logistics company. This provides the group a reliable tank killer capability,
Yeah,
as
no
even the
kidding.
Carl Gustav munitions would be of questionable effectiveness against most modern main battle tanks from the front. Being a force
That
that may
looks
be
heavy.
called to block enemy
Jeez.
movement in support of tank operations, each IFV also has several anti-tank mines. These can be
Nice,
employed
okay.
by the dismounted element to deny area to or delay the advance of enemy mechanized forces.
That is actually really freaking smart. And that's something I don't even consider with mechanized infantry, is you can have a lot more stuff loaded inside and on the outside of the vehicles that you don't actually have to carry yourself. So I'm thinking like, oh, they have to carry those mines all over the place. No, they don't even need to. And with the AT4s, they can have a bunch of those actually inside the vehicle as well. So they can determine what they need to take if they're going to dismount and when they dismount. So that's pretty freaking sweet. It's kind of nice to be able to do that and have options so you're not just taking everything and, you know, walking really far with it.
As for automatic weapons, the machine gunner can either take out the KSP-90, the Swedish version of the Mini-Me light machine gun chambered in 5.56,
Okay.
or the KSP-58, which is their version of the FN mag chambered in 7.62.
Nice.
If the mag is
M240.
taken out, the last rifleman would act as an assistant. However, we've also seen numerous videos of groups dismounting with 2 light machine guns. And the
Okay.
Instagram manager of
Nice.
the Roma company, the armored infantry company stationed on Gotland, states each group has 2 light machine guns and 1 general purpose machine gun at their disposal depending on the situation.
All right,
Generally
nice.
speaking, in training footage we've seen, the light machine gun seems to be preferred for restrictive terrain and when fighting mounted, while the general purpose machine
That
gun
makes
is
sense.
preferred in open country with longer sight lines.
Yep.
Another
Nice,
new
okay.
weapon that's hit the Swedish army is the AK-4D designated marksman rifle, a version of Sweden's G3 variant. It provides the group a slightly longer range and more precise fires,
Okay, I've
but
not
it's
seen
not
this one.
utilized here as a dedicated sniper rifle. We've been told the groups have the option of giving it to the rifleman or deputy group leader if necessary.
Okay, I like it. It looks
As
pretty
per
sweet.
Swedish doctrine, armored infantry support the action of tanks and enable their maneuver. They may do this through direct support, protecting open flanks, clearing captured terrain, and protecting supply lines.
Okay.
In a meeting engagement against an enemy mechanized force, the infantry may also be used to fix or delay forces with the CV-90, anti-armor weapons, and anti-tank mines, while tanks counterattack and target the enemy's vulnerable rear areas.
Yeah, again, that's another thing I don't consider is having dismounts is really freaking sweet. If you get into some really restricted terrain, you can just throw out some dismounts and they can just move around and it's a lot easier. But, you know, when you don't have the restricted terrain, you can move around with a lot more firepower. So it's pretty freaking sweet, I gotta say. And of course, the idea of not having to walk with all your gear is gonna be pretty enticing for a light infantry guy like myself. But yeah, if you guys are mechanized infantry, especially if you serve some time like doing the dismount sort of stuff, then let me know how it is, because it seems like it's, you know, a pretty sweet gig compared to just traditional light infantry, obviously.
The dismounted capabilities of the armored infantry are necessary to perform certain functions, such as in the defense or in restricted terrain. However, at the
There you go.
battalion level, the focus of the armored infantry is on supporting the tanks. Meanwhile, at the platoon level and lower, the main task of dismounts is to protect and enable the infantry fighting vehicle. This was a key shift from the Cold War era
This is
focus
sick.
on the dismounted fight. When armored infantry were transported in the less capable Panzer Bandwagen 302 armored personnel carrier.
What did he
The
call
change
it?
was likely
The what?
less capable Panzer Bandwagen 302 armored
Bandwagon?
personnel carrier. The
Okay.
change was likely due to the adoption of the more capable Stridsfordon 90, which is able to engage in close combat against mechanized forces in a way the legacy platform could not. The most clear indication
doubt.
of the shift was in the change of the platoon structure itself. During the Cold War era, platoons had a dedicated vehicle commander who would take over command of the APCs while the platoon
Okay.
commander and their deputy dismounted. This suggested a stronger emphasis on the dismounted fight, because the platoon
Yeah, I gotta say, huge props to the freaking old school footage and just, you know, the new stuff that they have in here. Really good pictures, really good footage, and it just allows you to get a better appreciation for how the gear is implemented. And of course, like the legacy stuff is always cool to see, to sort of see that evolution.
commander and platoon deputy could exercise more direct control over the dismounted infantry, while the vehicles maneuvered to directly support the infantry, protect a flank, or
He looks
conduct an
mad.
independent mission. This is the opposite of the current situation, where the platoon commander exercises more direct control over the vehicles and often delegates
Yeah.
command of the dismounts to an NCO.
That's a better choice
Additionally,
for sure.
it's very common to see Swedish armored infantry shooting from the rear hatches of the vehicle while moving.
That's
There's
sweet.
space for 4 soldiers to stand at the hatches at any time, providing security and possibly returning fire.
No kidding,
This capability may allow the Swedes to conduct higher tempo maneuvers, since infantry can
Yeah, no
stay
kidding.
mounted for longer. The mobility of the CV-90s and the Leopard 2s aren't hampered as bad by the speed of dismounted infantry. But of course, there are
Yeah, no kidding.
downsides to fighting mounted rather than dismounted. For example, the effectiveness of the infantry's fire when the vehicle is moving at any sort of speed is questionable, and they're unable to properly clear terrain while doing so. This tactic is probably
True. That's a
partially
good point.
situational, such as reacting to an ambush in close terrain or providing general security, but it's certainly represented more in Swedish training than with their counterparts in the US Army, for example. There are, of course, exceptions, such as holding ground or fighting in restrictive and complex terrain or urban environments.
Yep.
However, even in defensive situations, Swedish doctrine places a premium on mobility to quickly mass and concentrate forces wherever the enemy may choose to attack. A passive and static defense
it's a good choice
is
for
not
them,
the
I
calling
think.
card of the mechanized battalions, who likely don't have the bayonet strength to excel at many of the dismount-centric functions that the lighter forces with more infantry do.
Bayonet strength.
As for how these units combine arms, or pair tanks and infantry to make up for each arm's weaknesses, the Swedish system is much like what the American combined arms battalions were like before 2016. In a typical situation, each tank and armored infantry company would trade a platoon with the opposite type of company. So they'd end up with 2 companies with 2 tank platoons and 1 infantry platoon, and
Okay.
2 companies with 1 tank platoon and 2 infantry platoons. In other more fleeting situations,
That's a lot of
they can
vehicles.
form 1-to-1 company
That's all I
pairs,
could say.
which would entail pairing down to the group level. In other words, each tank being paired with its own IFV. Company teams can then be
Okay.
further reinforced with battalion and brigade assets depending on the mission. This could include pioneers or even bridging assets from the battalion logistics company if a team needs mobility support on the battlefield. Similarly, the company could receive brigade engineers as attachments or battalion anti-aircraft support.
Yeah, that is a very important point. That engineer support needs to be like direct support, not even like indirect support. If there's like a lead element or some movement going on, you need those engineers to be on standby, because if these guys come upon an obstacle in the road or what have you, then the entire formation stops and they become a very big target. So they need to be able to identify obstacles pretty quick and knock them out as soon as possible, so they're not getting, bunched up and what have you. So yeah, and engineers are going to be very, very important for this kind of unit.
If you enjoyed this look at Sweden's mechanized battalions, check out this video on Canada's mechanized infantry, an equivalent
right.
Western force with similar doctrine but very different equipment. We'll see you over there.
So of course, another fantastic video from Battle Order. So I will put the original video in the description so you guys can go check out their channel. Right now they have 114,000 subscribers, which is kind of surprising. I kind of thought they would have a lot more than that, because they do some really cool content. So definitely go over there and give them some love, give them a subscribe. And yeah, if you guys like military content, you're probably going to like their videos. It's just really interesting to see the differences between like one country's military units and their organization and in other countries. So yeah, really fascinating. Again, I can't really relate too much to mechanized infantry or tank sort of stuff, because that was never really my realm. So if you guys can provide some sort of information or insight, something that I might have missed or messed up, please put it down below, because yeah, I'm a light infantry kind of guy, so hearing all this stuff is like kind of going way over my head. But it's still really cool to check out, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it. You guys definitely wanted me to check out this video, and I'm glad I was able to get a little bit more exposure to how the layout is, because it's definitely not what I expected. When I see tanks, I separate them immediately from the infantry, because again, they call infantrymen crunchies in the Marine Corps, because obviously, they crunch when you go over them and whatnot. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of separation when it comes to stuff like that. Of course, tanks did support the infantry, but it wasn't in this regard where you have the mechanized infantry and the tanks sort of put into the same unit. And of course, these differences are going to reflect a bunch of different things, whether it be diplomatic policy, budget, population, just things like that are going to change the layouts. People are going to have different priorities. You have Australia where they really focus heavily on, making sure their light infantry has the best equipment. But then you have other units where they focus a little bit more on mechanized stuff or maybe more on logistics. So it's just cool to see those differences, and it's cool to get a good appreciation for everything, get some exposure in general. Now, I know this video came out a while ago, so I do appreciate you guys being persistent in getting me to react to this video, because I was definitely confused why I always saw like tanks and mechanized infantry when we were talking about the Swedish Armed Forces. Now it makes a little bit more sense. Not that much more sense because I'm still light infantry, but it makes a little bit more sense. So I appreciate that persistence. But yeah, if you guys have anything else to recommend, you can put it down in the comments section, or you can put it in the Discord server, because I pop in and out of the Discord every now and again to see what y'all are talking about or requesting or what have you. Pretty cool place to be. If you guys are going to check out the video description, I also have the merch down there and the Patreon if you guys want to support the channel. And you also get access to some extra content as well if you do the Patreon or if you do the membership, which is kind of cool because you get like that little icon next to your name and some like extra emojis and what have you. But yeah, I think it's pretty neat. Hopefully you guys think it's pretty neat as well. But thank you guys for watching. That's it for this video. I'll see you on the next one.